All right, looks like we're live on YouTube. So I am Eric Johnson, CTO of GitLab, and this is February 17th, 2021, and doing an AMA with the company. So Jorn, it looks like you've got the first question in the doc.
Yeah, so congrats to your new title, Eric. I just was wondering if it's something special for you personally, or is it just some new letters or a all new job for you?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think, first of all, thank you. I think, I haven't been particularly title focused in my career. I've had, and that's, it's easy to say when you have a big title, like the titles don't matter, right? So I acknowledge that. But I think it genuinely, if you look at my career, my LinkedIn, having kind of come up through the ranks, I haven't really focused on title a tremendous amount. I tend to focus on results and making my boss's life easier, making my teammates' lives better, their working lives. And I think that's really the right way to do it. There's definitely moments where you have to kind of like, advocate for yourself, make a proposal, or, maybe you're going through a performance review, you want to highlight some of the things you did, but that's a tiny portion of the time that I've spent on it. So for the most part, I tend to think about what I can do with, for the organization with the title and, what I can do, to provide for my family and things like that.
Cool, thanks.
Sure. Greg, you've got number 2.
All right. Thanks, Eric. And another title question, but congratulations on being elected as Silver Director for the Linux Foundation. Just wondering what this new role means for you or for GitLab.
Yeah, so thanks for asking. First, I'll say the timing of this AMA is totally coincidental. These things are scheduled, months in advance, and we just happen to have 2 announcements related to me this time. This wasn't planned. This is just wanted to call that out. So yeah, I was elected to be a director on the board of directors for the Linux Foundation. So that's exciting. In terms of what it means, it's brand new. So I literally just started coordinating with them this week. So I'm going to learn a lot. It's my first time doing board work, so it's a chance for me to stretch and grow. It's also a new organization to me, and I don't know what their policy about transparency is. I think we all know what GitLab's policy of transparency is, which is by default, everybody's allowed to know everything. So I don't want to immediately cause some kind of conflict with this new organization I'm a member of by just kind of like blurting out everything I think or know or idly speculating. So I'll speak in general terms, and as I get to know them better, hopefully I can be much more transparent within the company and on a YouTube live stream like this about it. So I think generally speaking, being a member of now this organization, I'm there to serve. So there's going to be problems or opportunities they have, and I'll hopefully be in a position to help, with my experience or my network or whatever it is. And then secondarily, I think there's going to be opportunities to create like these win-win scenarios that I'll be hunting for, like something that fits with their needs and something that fits with GitLab needs, and see if I can create that sort of connection. So there's a bunch of things, sort of potentials on this list. One I think I could kind of safely mention is I spoke with them, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and they mentioned they've got this project called DBOM or Digital Bill of Materials. And this might be interesting to GitLab as well. Like what it's meant to do is you have some software, you go through a build process, you've got this binary, like what's in this thing, right? Like, and this is really relevant nowadays because we've seen supply chain attacks like SolarWinds, and there's some other ones coming out of academia that are theoretically possible, or maybe in the wild, that are really impactful. And so the fact that we create and run a DevSecOps platform means, well, not only do we need this, but also can we do something that allows our customers and our users to feel safer about the dependencies that they're pulling in and bundling, and whether it's containers or binaries or things that they're shipping. Can we increase the level of confidence that they know what's in there and that it's not subject to known unmitigated attacks and things like that. So that might be an opportunity to say, hey, they need some help defining the project, some resources building it or something. And then it might be something that we including GitLab down the road, who knows? So that's emblematic of the types of things that might come out of this sort of collaboration. Any questions on that? Cool. Darva, number 3.
All right, I know you don't want to talk about roles, CTO roles, but I've been involved in a lot of conversations about roles at GitLab, whether it's what is the role of a staff, senior, principal. And it really kind of dawned on me that I didn't really understand the difference between the CTO role and at GitLab versus CTOs at other companies. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on the differences.
Sure. Yeah. And I was going to speak to some of this to answer Jorn's question, but I saw your question down below. I'm like, well, I'll save this stuff because I think your question sort of directly asks it. So what is a CTO? It sort of begs the question. And I think it's particularly apt because amongst all the C-level roles, this is probably the broadest and most dynamic, not broad in terms of they're doing the most things, broad in terms of it can mean so many different things. So I think the four types that are kind of relevant to discuss today are one, the one that we know the best. So DZ, our prior CTO, he shifted into a different role, I think a couple of years ago at this point, but that's the one a lot of people have been here a long time, including myself, remember. And he's, the co-founder CTO type. In our case, being an open core company, he's the founder, the initiative of the open source project, right? So it's even more meaningful than just being founder CTO. And that role is sort of immutable. It's irreplaceable, and we're fortunate that he's still here and he's working on things that benefit GitLab and that he's passionate about. So let's put that one aside because that's sort of like an untouchable role. So the three that are sort of relevant are one, I've worked with CTOs in the past. They're kind of like that PhD in computer science or some other hyper specialized field like autonomy or aerospace or something like that. And they've got a small team of researchers with them, and they're working on things that are really far future, and they're outside of engineering and product development sort of proper. They're working on things on the farthest time horizon. And then the second is kind of like the super VP of engineering. Meaning they run engineering and do a variety of other things. And then the third that I've worked with is almost kind of like the head sales engineer. Like they're working mostly with customers and they're doing evangelism and speaking and press and things like that. So of those three types, I think I'm clearly the middle one. I sort of came up through that kind of like engineering management, VP of engineering type role. So I think that's sort of the base of my responsibilities. Over the past, I'd say year, I took our press training and I became the executive account sponsor of a number of our big customers. And I've been doing some press and media interviews and things like that. So I've been branching out into that third type I've mentioned and doing some of those things, but by no means the majority of my responsibilities. And then part of this change, which was made official yesterday, is kind of branching out into that first area I mentioned. And so we're going to create a seventh department in engineering. So in addition to development, infrastructure, quality, security, support, and UX, there'll be this thing we're calling for now new markets. And there's going to be a leader. We're recruiting for a VP of new markets. The job family is live, and there's a handbook page that sort of stubs out this new department. And obviously this leader is going to take that over and flesh it out further. But this is really going to be rolling up some of what we call single engineer groups into this small sort of office and trying to work on things that don't have revenue today, don't even have usage today, but may 3 to 5 years out. So it's kind of working on that longer time horizon. And this is something that Sid spends a long time thinking about. And I think we're at the point where we need more people than just Sid thinking 3 to 5 years out. And so I'm going to get to work on a category of those projects with this person. So the interesting thing about new markets, and maybe someone, I see someone already put in the handbook, like, thanks. Is it's almost like an incubator. So think of like, you might fill out an application on Y Combinator and apply and start a company that way. Or you might take something you built and bring it to GitLab and do the same thing. But if you do it the latter way, you're doing it within this larger company and you're doing it within this larger code base because we're a single application for the DevSecOps lifecycle. So that's interesting and that's pretty unique, right? Because bigger companies, big projects have benefits. Like we have, if you were doing this by yourself, you'd be worrying about keeping the lights on and fundraising and all these other things. And someone doing this with us doesn't have to worry about that stuff. We're sort of taking care of those aspects. In the code base, we already have a bunch of stuff like authentication and with things they can benefit from. We also have users that will use this thing once it's in our single application. This is their benefits. The downsides are, though, is big companies come with sort of an inevitable degree of bureaucracy. And so how do you navigate that? Think of what founders have very little friction when they're starting something. They don't have security reviews and they don't have compliance and things like that. They don't have legal. They kind of fly under the radar. They probably need those things, but nobody's really paying attention until you become a bigger, significant company. So how can we do this in a way where we're allowing the company to focus on future, very important things and things that could double our valuation 5 or 10 years from now, take the benefits of being part of this larger code base and larger organization, but without any of the detractors. That's sort of the strategy here, and this makes it really sort of unique. So it'll be a really interesting role, attractive in some ways. It's going to be an incredibly difficult job in other ways for both myself and this person, but that's what we're intending to do. So I think in answer to your question, I think I'm that center type. Probably about 30% of companies have a CTO that also runs engineering. I think I'm that type, but I've been branching out into the customer facing press roles. And this is the sort of like longer time horizon type thing, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Should we go to number 4, Jorn again?
Yeah, just a quick question. Being on the Linux Foundation board now, what stops you from using a Linux laptop for your daily work?
I have an iMac, so I'm not on a laptop. That's that's the first thing. I have a desktop. I actually have a Linux server I've been running for about 10 years outside in the other room. So I do use it for various things. It runs so well. Like I hate to say I'm a daily Linux user because it runs so well. I don't even have to touch it daily, right? That's the beautiful thing about Linux. But I do use it at home and occasionally for work. You know, there's virtualized ways to use Linux and things like that. So it's been a while since I tried to make it my daily driver. I have a Chromebook, for instance, that's part of the company experiment that I travel with and whatnot, but we haven't been traveling at all. So it may be something that I think about. I'm almost near that hardware refresh point. And so I may think about that before I get a new device. There's also the Apple Silicon coming out too, so it's going to be two interesting things. Two interesting directions I could take my my next work device in, but we'll see. Chris, number 5.
Yeah, it's just a curious question. What do you see? What's your favorite Linux distribution, and do you see the market consolidating on a couple of distributions, or how do you see like the future of Linux going?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I've only been on the board 2 days, so that's kind of tough questions. I mean, I think just because I've had this server running for a decade now, it's on Ubuntu, so I think I have to say Ubuntu. It just works beautifully. At my last company, we're heavy users of CoreOS, and so the idea that you've got this sort of immutable file system is really interesting for containers. I think it got deprecated or open sourced, or I haven't really been following it, so it may not be around anymore. We also use Alpine though, so the idea of these sort of like microkernels and things like that are really sort of interesting. Oh, I see. Chris just slacked that CoreOS got bought by Red Hat. So I'm not sure what's going on with that project, but we'll see.
Thank you.
Sure.
Eric, I have a question. I'll type it after. What was the process to join the board? Were you interviewed, or what did that look like?
It was surprisingly asynchronous. You know, GitLab, we're distributed, we're all remote, we work asynchronous, which I tend to think of as a really unique way of working. But this was kind of the first time I've done a highly asynchronous process outside of GitLab. So they reached out to us, and we had an issue going internally with I think external comms and marketing about who might the suitable applicants be. What might those nomination statements look like? That was really the form it took. The interface was a nomination statement. So, you know, who am I? What have I done? How could I help the board? We submitted that. I think there was a light amount of, you know, campaigning, you know, reach out to your network and things like that. And I know some people kind of on the board who are voters who happen to know GitLabbers kind of reached out and said, hey, you know, who is this person? Are they a good person? I said, yes, you know, so I appreciate everybody that helped out with that process, and it worked out. And so, you know, I'd say I stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, GitLab is an incredibly powerful platform or soapbox to be standing on to do things like this. So it's a credit to the open source project and the company that we've built and our growth as a startup. So made it surprisingly smooth.
Cool, thanks. Andre, you're up.
And I should say it was Nerdsy Sanchez in marketing that really helped with the process. So I thanked her in the Slack channel, but I'll thank her here more broadly. So 7, Andre.
Thanks, Christy, for fixing my typo. I noticed. So Eric, I wanted to check if you have you keep an eye on any interesting cryptocurrency tokens. There's a lot of hypes and moves, but in particular, do you have any visibility on the basic attention token that has been gathering some interest and news? Have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, in general, cryptocurrencies, I heard about it, I think when I first moved out to San Francisco, this was like 2012. There was a guy mining on a USB stick in his MacBook while we were working, like tens of coins from, it wasn't even an ASIC. I think it was an ASIC. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I took a few minutes during lunch hour and tried to like set up a wallet and buy some. This is really before like Coinbase and the exchanges were common, little and easy to use. And I didn't quite get it working. At that time, I think Bitcoin was at like 75 cents or something like that. When Coinbase came around, I'm like, oh, well, this made it just so easy. So I bought, however, I think I had like 10 or 12 Bitcoins at one point. So looking at the price nowadays, I think it hit 50,000 yesterday or whatever. It's like, oh, I think I sold them when it hit like $600 or $800 and I walked away thinking like, yeah, pretty smart. Look at me. So I'm not a big, like when you're in San Francisco, you just hear about these things in coffee shops and stuff like that. So you build up this general awareness, but I can't say I was early or particularly savvy about the whole thing. And I think I still have some that is just sitting there mainly to avoid FOMO. So when Bitcoin goes up, I can say like, oh, well, I have like a couple $100 of it or something like that. Versus when you have zero, it's kind of like, oh, you regret not participating in some way. So that's really my involvement in it. I mean, philosophically, I think it's one, intended to be a value store, and two, intended to be a transaction medium. It's clearly a value store. It may be very risky or volatile. Whether or not it's a transaction medium is kind of the big question for cryptocurrencies. Like, would they eventually replace fiat currencies or something down the line, or just be tolerated kind of next to fiat currencies? I don't know. The fact that Tesla just bought a big 1.5 billion or something like that, and they're going to accept it for cars is really interesting, but we'll see how that works out. I haven't been following the basic attention coin thing that you mentioned, so maybe you could just kind of like underline what that one is for people. Sure.
So first, I think a lot of the people on the call might recognize the creator's name, Brendan Eich, who's behind JavaScript. But so basically what it is a token that is aimed at replacing the broken model of advertising on the internet, where you by browsing will collect tokens and generate tokens. And then you're able to set up on the browser, for example, Brave, you're able to set up a contribution, a monthly contribution to the websites you visit. In this particular thing, it has been used for tipping online, where you want to tip a tweet author, or in our particular more close to home, an open source project. You might be able to tip something on GitLab using this token if you so wish to do that. The curious is that it's not bound to Brave or any particular thing. It's just a crypto any platform online can implement and adopt as a currency. But yeah, as you said very well, volatile, very much. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it is something that I keep an eye out, but it's something that I have no idea how it's going to turn out. I'm going to put a link on the agenda so that people can investigate.
I Googled it while you were talking and just kind of read the overview page. So it seems interesting. I mean, in terms of tipping, I mean, it seems like being an open source company and having a general concern for open source projects, maybe it's the way that open source contributors or founders could get some revenue to work on the project more time. So that seems like a good angle. In terms of advertising, I mean, I've always been in enterprise technology. I've never been in consumer technology, so I can't claim to be an expert about ads and things like that. Maybe it's a way to, allow for advertising, but at the same time, allow for a little bit more anonymity on the web, for better or worse. I think a lot of us are maybe techno-libertarians and just believe in that as a value, but as browsers is one thing. when you look at what's going on in some countries with journalists and things like that, anonymity is much more sort of important to me. So I don't know if there's any kind of angle there, but those are the types of things I tend to think about is how can technology benefit society in some way? It's possible to do things, make a lot of money quickly, but that's, my hope is the technology industry can do, improve the human condition. So I tend to search for angles like that.
Thanks, Eric.
And I'll
Sure.
just reminder that we have 4 minutes. So Maritza, your question's probably our last one. Do you want to verbalize number 8?
Sure. Sorry, this is kind of a long one, but I have recently been attending I've been attending events that talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I was wondering what are some of the things on your mind as a CTO in terms of, furthering our value of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And specifically, I thought it was really cool that Google has this department about product inclusion. And, I've been mentioning it to several different groups. So would just love your thoughts on how we can keep growing our engineering org in that way.
Sure, yeah. And if we just happen to have launched some new handbook content we call FY22 direction, so fiscal 22 direction, meaning a 1-year time horizon. So kind of a larger arc of work to which we can all ascribe like the daily tasks, maybe the things we don't like to provide some meaning. Things like quarterly OKRs should be big bites out of this year-long arc. And diversity is, I think, in the second paragraph or something like that. So some of the things we did and are doing, I'd want to call out are, we launched an internship last year. And I think this was, internship programs are typically sort of a long-term recruiting play, and that's true for us. But for us, it was also like, how can all remote really work for people that are new to the technology industry? I mean, I want to say entry level, but it may be someone who's a mother who's returning to the workforce after taking some time off to care for their kids. It might be a coal miner that got some computer science training and wants to switch fields because their field is changing or something like that. That's something real that's happening, I believe, in Kentucky. So that's why I call that out. It's not abstract. Or it may be a new grad from a university program or something like that. And when you start your first tech job, you need a tremendous amount of, help and assistance. And lots of times you're sitting physically next to someone beside you. You just pepper them with questions all day. And all remote, you don't have that sort of office environment where that could happen. So for us, we really wanted to prove that all remote can work for people that are brand new to technology. We created a bunch of extra support systems. And that program had a sort of diversity angle because our recruiting methodology at the time was outbound only. And so it ended up being a very diversity-focused internship program. We formalized that aspect of it. So that's one. And that program was successful. We ended up converting 3 of our interns to full-time, and that was tremendously exciting. Then after that, we said, how can we move upstream, so to speak, in people's career development? So the internship leads right into an intermediate full-time software engineer position, let's say. What about people that are looking to get into an internship? What could we do for that? So this past year, FY21, we launched a voluntary coaching program for underrepresented groups. So anyone in engineering, anyone in the company that has time and skills can volunteer to be a coach. We've got 3 partners identified: Relearn, Latinitas, and Free Code Camp. And you can donate your time to help people from underrepresented groups just learn the basic skills they need to get their first tech job. And if they're successful, that would lead into our internship, which then could lead into, again, an intermediate position at GitLab and potentially full-time employment. So those are some concrete ways people can help. The other thing I would want to call out is our DIBS team just launched brand new diversity training that's very GitLab focused. So we've had training in the past that's sort of like the generic canned stuff. In California, there's some state mandated training, but it's very generic. We've all seen those sort of videos. They launched something that's kind of unique to us, and being all remote, being distributed. We work with people across different languages, different cultures. Those are things you don't typically see highlighted in other diversity programs. And so it was cool to see them sort of tailor that. So that's now available. I encourage everybody to take that. And then, we'll likely, we'll get, I don't know, half or 2/3 of the organization that way. And then, maybe we'll do an OKR next quarter to make sure everybody goes through the program or something like that. So those are kind of my thoughts on diversity and what we're doing. Is that helpful?
Awesome.
Eric, could I jump in there real quick? You also approved the advanced software engineering course that we're partnering with Morehouse College on, and those are college students,
good
and
one.
we've got participants on the call who are instructors, and those students very well could apply to our internships. And those are students being exposed to the GitLab product for the very first time, as well as learning things about our culture and just a lot of great things about our product.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that one. If you can drop in a URL to that program in the doc, that'd be great, Darva. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We are just a minute over our time, so I will stop the live stream, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Any last words, Eric?
Just thanks for all the great questions, and my thoughts go out to everybody in Texas, in the middle part of the USA, that's struggling with the weather and the power situation. We got Christopher Lefelholtz out there trying to stay warm. So, hope everybody's doing well, and let us know if GitLab can help.